We came for water.
We didn't know the water was already guarded.
Guards it better than we guard ourselves.
The sky broke first, no thunder, no warning. Just a tear in the blue, wide and silent, as if some giant hand had ripped the world open from the inside. Then the ships came through, hundreds of them, black as burnt iron, sliding into orbit with the calm, cold patience of predators who already knew they had won. Commander Vrail stood on the bridge of the Kryvenn flagship, arms folded behind his back, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the view screen. 200 worlds had fallen before this one. 200 species had wept, begged, or fought and died screaming. He expected nothing different here. This planet was small, fragile. Its cities glowed with soft, warm light like a candle burning in an open window, inviting, unguarded, unaware. "Scans complete," said his second-in-command, a narrow-eyed officer named Threll. "No orbital defenses. No fleet. No shields. They have nothing, Commander." Vrail allowed himself a thin smile. "Then they will learn quickly." But something about the silence bothered him. Not the silence of fear. The silence of waiting. Down on the surface, the city of Halden Bay slept beneath a sky it did not yet know was broken. Street lights flickered against the dark. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Children's bicycles lay tipped over on quiet lawns. It was, by every measure the invaders understood, an ordinary evening on an ordinary world, and yet every single human was already gone, not fled, not hiding. Gone. In the quiet, practiced way of people who had rehearsed this moment 100 times before, though none of them had ever truly believed they would need it. Basements sealed, shelters locked, roads emptied hours before the ships had even finished tearing through the clouds. There had been no panic, no chaos, just calm, methodical, silent movement, like a body pulling its hand back from a flame before the pain even registers. Vrail did not know this yet. None of the Kryvenn did. "Target the coastal city," Vrail ordered, a show of strength, nothing more. "Let them see what waits for those who resist." The strike came down like a falling star, splitting the night in two. Fire bloomed across Halden Bay, swallowing buildings whole, turning glass to rivers of molten light. On the bridge, the crew watched the destruction with the practiced boredom of soldiers who had done this before. Threll almost smiled. Almost. Then the smoke began to clear, and the silence returned. But wrong this time. Heavier. Watching. "Commander," Threll said slowly, "the structural collapse pattern is off." Vrail turned. "Explain." "There's no blood signature. No biological readings in the wreckage. Not one." Threll's voice had lost its edge of boredom now. "Commander, there was no one in the city." The bridge went quiet. Vrail stepped closer to the view screen, studying the smoldering ruins, glowing faintly on the dark coastline. A city of thousands burned to ash in seconds, and not a single body. Not one scream had reached their sensors. Not one warning had been sent, no distress signal, no cry for mercy. Just an empty shell, offered up like bait. They knew. Vrail said quietly, more to himself than to his crew. "They knew we were coming. It should have been impossible." His fleet had traveled faster than any signal could warn a primitive world. There had been no time for evacuation, not for a species, this young, this fragile, and yet the humans had moved days, maybe weeks, before the first ship ever tore through their sky. Threll's hands hovered over his console, uncertain. "Orders, Commander?" Vrail said nothing for a long moment. He stared at the dark, empty coastline, at the wreckage of a city that had given up nothing, not one life, not one secret. Somewhere beneath that calm, dark world, something had known, something had prepared. and that meant the silence they had mistaken for weakness was never weakness at all. It was patience. "Send scouts to the surface," Vral finally said. His voice, lower now, edged with something he had not felt in 200 conquests, something close to doubt. "I want a specimen. I want to know what kind of creature evacuates a city without leaving a single footprint behind." Threll hesitated before answering. "And if they resist?" Vral's eyes did not leave the screen where, far below, the ocean shimmered faintly under the dying firelight, vast, dark, and utterly still. "They won't," he said. "Not yet." But even as the words left his mouth, deep beneath those quiet waves, something ancient stirred. Something that had been sleeping long before Vral's ships had ever crossed the stars, and had just felt, for the first time in 1,000 years, the heat of fire touched the surface of its world. The hunt had only just begun, and the hunters had no idea they were already being watched. The scout team moved through the ruins of Halden Bay like ghosts hunting for the one life this dead city had somehow forgotten to erase. They found her in a small house 3 streets back from the fire line. A girl, 16, maybe 17, sitting calmly at a kitchen table, as if the sky hadn't torn open hours before. Her name, according to the faded photograph beside her, was Arya Voss. She did not run. She did not scream. When the door shattered inward and 3 armored Kryvenn soldiers filled the room with their weapons raised, she simply looked up from her folded hands and smiled. It was the wrong reaction. Every species they had ever conquered gave the same response to capture: terror, tears, desperate pleading. The soldiers hesitated, weapons trembling slightly, waiting for the fear that should have already arrived. It never came. They dragged her aboard the flagship in restraints built to hold creatures 3 times her size. She didn't fight the bindings. She studied the ship instead, the corridors, the guards, the flickering lights, with the quiet, patient focus of someone memorizing an exit route she hadn't decided to use yet. Commander Vral met her in the interrogation chamber, arms folded, studying her the way a hunter studies an animal he doesn't recognize. "You understand what has happened to your world," he said through the translator. "Your kind has no defense against us." Arya tilted her head. "You think this is our defense?" Vral's eyes narrowed. The biometric scanners built into the chamber, walls fed data across his display: heart rate, neural activity, stress markers. On 200 conquered worlds, this moment always produced the same numbers: spiking fear, flooding panic, the body's desperate scream to survive. Arya's readings sat flat, calm, steady, like still water before a storm. "Fascinating," Threll muttered from the control panel, unable to hide the unease in his voice. "Commander, she shows no fear response. None. It's as if she doesn't understand what fear is." "She understands," Vrel said slowly, watching her eyes. They weren't empty. They weren't broken. They were waiting. "She simply isn't afraid of us." He leaned closer, close enough to see his own reflection in her calm, steady gaze. "What are you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost curious despite himself. Arya's smile didn't waver. "Wrong question," she said softly. "You should be asking, what's coming for you?" The chamber lights flickered once. Then, deep in the belly of the ship, every alarm began screaming at once. Threll's hands flew across his console, color draining from his face as impossible numbers filled the screen. Something massive, moving fast, rising from the ocean floor, directly beneath the fleet, undetected until the exact second it chose to be seen. Vrel turned toward the viewport just as the first tremor shook the ship beneath his feet. Arya's voice followed him, calm as ever, almost gentle. "You woke it." Up, 3 kilometers beneath the Kryvenn fleet, in a trench the sun had never touched, something opened its eyes for the first time in 1,000 years. The harvesting drones hadn't meant to find it. They were built for one purpose only: drill, extract, pump the ocean's water into orbit before the humans could organize a resistance that would never come. Drone 7 reached the trench floor first, its metal claws sinking into ancient volcanic rock, searching for the deepest, purest water reserves on the planet. It found a wall instead, smooth, warm, breathing. Aboard the flagship, the first sign of trouble was small, a flicker on Threll's monitor, a temperature spike no larger than a heartbeat. He almost dismissed it. Almost. Then Platform 3 went dark, not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone from every sensor at once, as if the ocean itself had reached up and swallowed it whole. Threll's hands moved fast across the console, rerouting. Power, searching for wreckage, for a signal, for anything. Platform 2, report, he said into the comm, voice tight. Static answered. Then faintly a voice, human, calm, but strained with something that sounded almost like awe. It's here. It's actually here. Identify the threat, Threll snapped. What is it? Silence stretched long enough that Threll thought the channel had died completely. Then the voice returned, quieter now, trembling not with fear but disbelief. Kalith. The word meant nothing to the ship's translators. No record. No database entry. Nothing in 200 conquered worlds had ever spoken that name. Then the channel went dead. On the bridge, Commander Vral watched the ocean on the view screen, vast, dark, and suddenly terribly alive. Deep beneath the waves, a faint light had begun to pulse, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of something too large to measure. It grew brighter with every passing second, spreading outward beneath the entire fleet, a glow the size of a city, then a country, then something that made the ship's sensors simply stop counting. Braille felt something he hadn't felt in 200 years of conquest. He felt small. Pull the drones back, he ordered, his voice losing its usual iron calm. Pull everything back now. But it was already too late. The light beneath the water surged upward, and the entire ocean around the fleet began to rise, not in waves, but in one single impossible motion, as if the sea itself had decided to stand. Threll's voice cracked over the comm, barely a whisper. Commander, I don't think that's the water moving. The glow broke the surface, and what rose from the deep was not water at all. Parter, the ocean did not fall. It stood, a wall of black water rising higher than the ships themselves, glowing, faintly from within like something breathing beneath its own skin. On the bridge no one spoke. No one dared. Then slowly a shape began to form inside the glow. Not a wave, not a storm. Something alive. Vrail's hands gripped the console tight enough to crack the metal beneath his fingers. Identify it, he ordered, though his voice had lost its command. Threll, identify it now. Threll's screen filled with numbers that made no sense, mass readings too large for any living creature, energy signatures older than the Kryvenn Empire itself. Commander, he whispered, it's not attacking. It's just rising. Watching. In the interrogation chamber, Arya finally stopped, smiling. You wanted to know what we are, she said quietly, watching the light spill through the chamber's small viewport. That's not us. That's the reason nobody has ever tried what you're trying twice. Vrail stormed into the chamber, fury cracking, through his composure. Explain. Now. Arya's eyes didn't waver. Long before your fleet ever found this planet, something ancient lived beneath our oceans. It could have destroyed us the first day we found it. Instead, we made a choice. She paused, letting the silence weigh on him. We didn't fight it. We listened to it, and in return, it agreed to sleep, as long as no one threatened the water it was born from. A monster, Vrail spat. You bargained with a monster. No, Arya said softly. We bargained with the only thing on this planet more patient than us, and you just spent 3 days drilling holes into its home. Vrail's comm crackled violently. Commander, the harvesting fleet. Kalith is moving directly beneath them. Vrail turned back to Arya, desperation cracking his voice for the first time. Call it off. Tell it to stop. Arya shook her head slowly. I can't call off the ocean, Commander. And even if I could... Her eyes drifted toward the viewport, toward the impossible glow swallowing the horizon. I wouldn't. You didn't come here to talk. You came here to take. Outside, the light beneath the waves surged brighter, and the first harvesting ship's hull began to groan under pressure that shouldn't have existed in open water. Then it screamed. A sound of tearing metal, followed by silence. The first ship fell like a burning star, dragged beneath the waves by something the size of a mountain. Vrel watched from the bridge as 3 centuries of Kryvenn engineering, hulls that had survived 200 conquests, were torn apart, like paper in Calith's wake. But it wasn't just the creature. Missiles rose from beneath the ocean's surface, launched from hidden platforms Vrel's scanners had dismissed as fishing vessels. Human weapons, human precision, timed perfectly to strike the moment Calith forced the fleet into formation. They built this, Threll said, disbelief cracking his voice as data flooded his screen. Commander, this isn't chaos, this is choreographed. They knew exactly how it would move. They've been preparing weapons to fight alongside it for years. Vrel's fists clenched. 200 worlds had taught him one truth. Primitive species panicked, scattered, begged. This one had built a war machine around a god and waited, patient, as stone for someone foolish enough to test it. Full offensive, Vrel snarled, abandoning restraint entirely. Target the creature directly. Use the core cannon. Threll froze. Commander, the core cannon wasn't built for surgical strikes. If we fire into the ocean at that yield, we won't just kill it. We'll boil the coastline for 1,000 kilometers. Millions of humans. I don't care, Vrel cut him off, eyes wild with humiliation and fear. Burn it. Burn all of it. In the interrogation chamber, the ship's violent shuddering threw Arya against her restraints. She didn't cry out. Instead, as the ship groaned and alarms shrieked around her, something in her expression shifted. Calm giving way to quiet, dangerous certainty. She began working her wrists free. On the bridge, the core cannon's power core screamed to life, red light bleeding through every corridor of the ship, casting long shadows across Vrel's face as he watched the ocean below. Glowing, alive, patient, preparing to unleash a weapon that would silence an entire coastline to prove a point. The restraint bolts snapped. Arya stood, rubbing her wrists, and looked toward the door with the calm expression of someone who had simply been waiting for the right moment. You should have just asked for the water, she whispered. Then she moved. Part go. Arya moved through the ship like she'd walked its corridors 100 times in her mind, ducking past scrambling soldiers too consumed by chaos to notice one calm, human girl. She didn't run toward escape. She ran toward the bridge. Below the fleet, Calith moved with terrible precision, guided not by rage but by the same quiet patience Arya had shown Vrel in that chamber. Human missiles struck weak points in Kryvenn hulls the moment Calith exposed them. A partnership built over years of secret preparation, not for conquest, but for exactly this day. The core cannon reached full charge just as Arya burst onto the bridge. Stand down, she said, voice cutting through the alarms with startling authority. Look outside, Commander. Really look. Vrel turned, weapon raised, finger hovering near the firing control, and froze. Through the viewport, Calith hovered motionless above the water, dozens of Kryvenn ships already disabled and drifting, powerless around it. It hadn't destroyed the fleet. It had stopped it. A message, not a massacre. We don't want your empire's grave, Arya said quietly. We want you to leave and remember why. Vral's hand trembled on the trigger. Threll, silent until now, finally spoke. Commander, we've lost. Firing now kills us with everything else. Long seconds passed. Then Vral's hand fell away. Hours later, a single escape pod launched from the crippled flagship, carrying Vrel alone back toward the stars, humiliated but alive, because Arya had insisted on it. Someone needed to carry the truth home. Before the pod sealed, Arya's voice crackled through his calm one final time. This planet was never undefended, Commander. We just never needed to show you until you tried to take what wasn't yours. The pod disappeared into the dark, carrying a warning across the galaxy, one that would reach 100 worlds before any of them dared look at Earth's oceans again. Leave Earth's water alone. Whatever guards it better than we guard ourselves.